25 years of lying could be undone by a single itch. Ivy scrubbed the counter until her knuckles turned white, but the phantom burn under the patch on her arm wouldn't stop. It was the suppressants. They were failing. She didn't know what scared her more, the burning sensation or the fact that she was sweating. Sweating meant scent. Scent meant death. "Order up, Ghost," the cook yelled, slamming a plate of raw steak onto the metal pass. Ivy flinched. She hated that nickname. Ghost. It fit, though. She was nobody. Just a shadow in a grease-stained apron trying to survive one more shift at the trough. She grabbed the plate. The smell of raw meat made her stomach roll. It wasn't because she was human, it was because she wasn't. But she had to pretend. She had to be weak. She had to be prey. As the wind shifted, the front door chimed. The air in the diner changed instantly. It went from the smell of stale coffee and old grease to something sharp. Electric. Ozone and pine. Alphas. Ivy kept her head down. Her heart skipped a beat, then hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew the drill. Don't look. Don't breathe deep. Don't exist. Table 4, her boss hissed, shoving her shoulder. Move it. Ivy's grip tightened on the plate. She walked toward the booth in the back, forcing her legs to move. Her body moved on instinct, keeping her posture slumped. Small. Harmless. There were 3 of them. Big men in expensive suits that cost more than this entire building. They took up too much space. Their energy sucked the air out of the room. But then, the one in the middle shifted. He didn't look like the others. He looked bored. Like a king forced to sit in the mud. He was staring out the window, tapping a finger on the table. Ivy held her breath. She just needed to drop the food and run. Just drop and run. Without warning, the man turned his head. His eyes weren't just blue. They were ice. Cold and sharp enough to cut glass. And they locked right on her. Time stood still. Ivy felt the patch on her arm sizzle. A drop of sweat rolled down her neck. She prayed to a moon she wasn't allowed to worship that her scent was still hidden. Please. Not today. Rare, the man said. His voice was deep. A low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. I ordered it rare. It is, Ivy whispered. Her voice trembled. He leaned in. Just an inch. But it felt like he had crossed an ocean. He sniffed the air. Once. Twice. Her chest ached. He smelled something. She saw his nostrils flare. He smelled a lie. Maybe it was bad luck, but that was when the suppressant itch turned into a stinging fire. Ivy gasped softly. She tried to step back. She needed to get to the kitchen. She needed to get out. Waitress, one of the other men barked. Water. Yes, she choked out. Right away. She turned too fast. As a result, her hip checked the corner of the table. The heavy ceramic plate in her hand wobbled. She tried to catch it. She failed. The plate crashed to the floor. The steak slid across the dirty tiles. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the steak knife. It bounced. It spun. And then, it sliced across her palm. A sharp, hot pain sliced through her hand. Ivy stared at it. Red. Bright red blood welled up in her palm. It dripped. 1 drop. 2 drops. Splattering onto the linoleum. The silence that followed was heavy. Suffocating. She didn't just bleed red. She bled scent. And without the suppressants covering the inside of her veins, that blood screamed. It didn't smell like a human waitress. It smelled like wild honeysuckle and rain. It smelled like a high-tier omega. It smelled like treason. Before she could move, the air in the room got hot. Violent. Every head in the diner turned. Ivy looked up. The man with the ice blue eyes wasn't looking at the window anymore. He was looking at her blood. And he didn't look bored. He looked hungry.
Kieran hated the smell of despair. It coated the walls of this dump. It smelled like cheap grease and fear. He didn't want to be here. The council meeting had run long, and his beta, Marcus, had insisted they stop for food. Now, Kieran just wanted to burn the place down. Eat, Alpha, Marcus grunted, shoving a menu at him. You're growling. I'm thinking, Kieran corrected, though the growl rose in his throat anyway. He was tired of the politics. Tired of the lies. The council was rotting from the inside out, and he was the only one trying to hold the roof up. He needed a break. He needed silence. Instead, he got a waitress who smelled like bleach and anxiety. He watched her from the corner of his eye. She was small. Too thin. She moved like she was trying to apologize for taking up space. She kept her head down, hiding her face behind a curtain of frizzy brown hair. Boring. Yet, there was something else. Beneath the smell of bleach, there was a ghost of a scent. Something sweet. It poked at the back of his mind. Like a memory he couldn't quite place. He watched her approach the table. Her hands were shaking. Not just a little trembling, but a bone-deep rattle. She was terrified of him. Good. She should be. Rare, Kieran said, just to see if she would flinch. She did. She dropped the plate on the table, her eyes wide and glassy. She looked like a rabbit seconds before the jaws snapped shut. But then, the wind shifted. It was subtle. A tiny draft from the kitchen vent. But it hit Kieran like a physical blow. Honeysuckle. Sweet, cloying, maddening honeysuckle. His wolf stirred. It didn't just wake up, it slammed against his ribs. Mate? No. That was impossible. Omegas were rare. High-tier omegas were practically extinct. And they didn't work in roadside diners smelling like industrial cleaner. He narrowed his eyes, studying her. She was sweating. She looked sick. Without another word, one of his men barked for water. The girl jumped. It happened in slow motion. She turned. She stumbled. The plate fell. Clang. The knife spun. Kieran saw the skin on her palm split before the blood even surfaced. He saw the flash of red. And then, the smell hit him. It wasn't a ghost anymore. It was a tidal wave. The scent of her blood filled the room, drowning out the grease, the coffee, and the fear. It was pure. It was royal. And it was familiar. Kieran's heart stopped. He knew that scent. He had smelled it in the evidence lockers 20 years ago. He had smelled it on the clothes of a dead man. General Thorne. The traitor. This girl wasn't just an Omega. She was the daughter of the most hated wolf in history. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. If the council found her, they wouldn't just kill her. They would make it a spectacle. But that wasn't the only problem. The problem was the other men in the diner. Kieran heard the shift. The low, guttural sounds of wolves losing control. The scent was driving them crazy. It was driving him crazy. His vision blurred at the edges, turning red. Mine, his wolf roared. Protected. Mine. He saw Marcus's eyes glaze over. He saw a trucker at the counter stand up, drool gathering at the corner of his mouth. They were going to tear her apart. If he didn't act, she was dead. If he arrested her, she was dead. There was only one way to keep her alive. He had to be faster than the law. He had to be faster than the monsters. In the span of a breath, Kieran made his choice. He didn't think about the consequences. He didn't think about his reputation. He let the beast take the wheel. With a snarl that shook the windows, Kieran launched himself out of the booth. He wasn't a politician anymore. He was a weapon. He had to claim her. Now. Before the first drop of blood dried.
Ivy stared at her hand. The blood was so bright. Why was it so bright? She couldn't breathe. The air in the diner had turned into syrup. Thick. Hot. Heavy. Every tiny hair on her arm stood up. She felt eyes on her. Not human eyes. Wolf eyes. Dozens of them. She heard a chair scrape against the floor. It sounded like a gunshot. Run, her brain screamed. Run, run, run. But her feet were nailed to the floor. The fear paralyzed her. This was it. The nightmare she had lived with for 25 years. It was finally happening. From the corner of her eye, she saw a blur of movement. It was the man. The alpha with the ice eyes. He didn't move like a person. He moved like a shadow. He vaulted over the table, scattering glasses and silverware. He was huge. Terrifying. A scream trapped in her throat. Before she could move, he was on her. He didn't hit her. He slammed into her, pinning her body against the service counter. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs. "Don't move," he growled. His voice wasn't human. It was a vibration that rattled her teeth. Ivy squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the pain. Waiting for his teeth to rip out her throat. She was a traitor's daughter. This was her punishment. But the pain didn't come. Instead, she felt heat. He pressed his body against hers, covering her completely. He was a wall of muscle and expensive wool. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, right where her pulse was fluttering like a dying moth. He inhaled. A deep, jagged sound. "Mine," he snarled. It was loud. Possessive. It echoed off the tile walls. Ivy gasped. Her eyes flew open. He wasn't killing her. He was smelling her? His nose brushed against her skin. The sensation sent a shockwave of electricity down her spine. It was wrong. It was terrifying. But her body, her traitorous body, liked it. Her knees buckled. He caught her. One massive hand splayed across her lower back, holding her up. His grip was iron. "Back off," he roared at the room. Ivy peeked over his shoulder. The diner was frozen. The other men were standing, looking confused, their eyes wide and wild. But they were backing down. They were submitting. Because he had claimed her. The realization made Ivy's stomach drop. A public claiming. He hadn't just attacked her. He had branded her. In front of witnesses. In front of everyone. He pulled back just an inch. His ice blue eyes locked onto hers. They were blown wide, the pupils swallowing the blue. He looked frantic. He looked dangerous. "You are going to walk out that door with me," he whispered, his voice rough. "And you are not going to say a word." His hand moved to her injured palm. He covered the cut with his own thumb, smearing the blood. Sealing the scent. Ivy trembled. She looked at his face. She wanted to fight him. She wanted to scream. But then, she saw it. Deep in his eyes, beneath the rage, beneath the hunger. Fear. He was scared too. Why was an alpha scared of a waitress? "Do you understand?" he hissed, his breath hot on her face. As the silence roared around them, Ivy nodded. She didn't have a choice. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. He was using his body as a shield. "Let's go," he commanded. Ivy let him lead her. She was walking out of her life. She was walking out of the ordinary world and into the den of a monster. And as the door chimed behind them, signaling their exit, Ivy knew one thing for sure. The girl who served coffee was dead. The traitor had just been found. The click of the door lock sounded like a gunshot. Ivy threw herself against the leather seat of the armored SUV, her fingers scrambling for the handle. She tugged. She pulled. Nothing. Child locks, the man said. His voice was calm. Too calm. It didn't match the violence of what had just happened in the diner. Ivy stopped fighting the door. She pressed her back against the cool leather, trying to make herself small. Her chest heaved, each breath a struggle against the panic tightening her throat. She was trapped. She looked at him. He was driving with one hand, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting long, sharp shadows. He looked like a statue carved out of ice and regret. Where was he taking her? To a black site? To the council? To a shallow grave in the woods? Who are you? She whispered. Her voice cracked. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the road, his jaw tight. Someone who just saved your life, he replied. Ivy wanted to laugh. Saved her? He had humiliated her. He had branded her. He had ruined 25 years of careful hiding in 5 minutes. You claimed me, she accused. You don't even know my name. I know what you are, he said softly. The air in the car turned to ice. Ivy froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. He knows. Did he know she was a trader's daughter? Or did he just know she was an Omega hiding in plain sight? If he knew about her father, she was already dead. She looked out the window. The city lights were fading, replaced by the dark, looming shapes of trees. They were leaving the city. They were going into the territory of the elite packs. Into the wolf's den. What followed was a silence so heavy it felt like it had weight. Ivy watched his reflection in the glass. He didn't look like the monsters she had grown up fearing. He looked tired. But then, he reached into his pocket. Ivy flinched, bracing for a weapon. A knife. A silencer. Instead, he pulled out a handkerchief. It was white silk, pristine. He tossed it into her lap. Your hand, he said. Wrap it. The smell is distracting. Ivy looked down at her palm. The cut was still oozing, staining her uniform. The scent of honeysuckle was filling the car, thick and sweet. She picked up the cloth. It smelled like him. Pine and ozone. She brought it to her nose. Just for a second. It didn't smell like fear. It smelled like safety. She hated herself for thinking that. She wrapped her hand tight, wincing as the silk dug into the cut. Where are we going? She asked again, her voice stronger this time. He finally looked at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were glowing faintly in the dark. Home, he said. And for some reason, that word sounded more like a threat than a promise.
Kieran gripped the steering wheel until the leather creaked. He was losing control. The car was filled with her scent. It was everywhere. It soaked into the upholstery, into his clothes, into his lungs. It was driving his wolf insane. Mate. Hurt. Protect. His instincts screamed at him to pull over. To crawl into the back seat. To lick the wound on her hand until it healed. To cover her with his body and never let her go. But he couldn't. He had to be the alpha. He had to be cold. If he showed her even an inch of weakness, she would run. And if she ran, the council would find her. And if they found her, they would hang her. He glanced at the rearview mirror. She was huddled in the corner, wrapped in his handkerchief. Her eyes were huge, dark pools of terror. She looked fragile. Breakable. But beneath the fear, he saw something else. Steel. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She was calculating. Planning. She was her father's daughter. They turned onto the private road leading to his estate. The iron gate swung open, sensing his tag. The massive stone house loomed ahead, dark and imposing against the storm clouds. Kieran parked the SUV in front of the main entrance. The rain had started to fall, heavy sheets of water that blurred the world. He killed the engine. "Stay close to me," he ordered. He got out and walked around to her side. He opened the door. She didn't move. She just stared at him, her body tense. She was waiting for him to drag her out. He sighed. He didn't want to touch her. Touching her made it harder to think. But they were exposed out here. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She didn't believe him. He could smell the doubt rolling off her in waves. Without warning, he reached in. He didn't grab her arm. He scooped her up. She gasped, her hands flying to his chest to steady herself. She was light. Too light. She felt like a bird in his arms. He kicked the car door shut and strode toward the house. The rain plastered his shirt to his skin, but he didn't feel the cold. He only felt the heat of her body against his. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a vibration against his chest. "Put me down," she hissed. "Not until we're inside," he growled. He carried her up the steps. His head of security, Marcus, opened the front door. Marcus took one look at the girl in Kieran's arms, smelled the blood, and his eyes went wide. "Alpha?" Marcus asked, stepping back. "Clear the hall," Kieran commanded. "No staff. No eyes. Now." Marcus nodded and ran. Kieran carried her into the foyer. It was a cavernous space with marble floors and a grand staircase. It was designed to impress. To intimidate. He set her down. She stumbled back immediately, putting distance between them. She looked around the opulent room, her eyes wide. She looked like a wild animal trapped in a museum. "Welcome to your cage," she whispered, her voice bitter. Kieran flinched inwardly. She wasn't wrong. "It's a sanctuary," he corrected. "As long as you're inside these walls, the council can't touch you." "And you?" she asked, tilting her chin up. "Can you touch me?" The question hung in the air, charged and dangerous. Kieran looked at her. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But he knew the game he had to play. "I only touch what is mine," he lied. "And right now, you're just a problem I have to solve." He turned his back on her before she could see the truth in his eyes. "Go upstairs. Second door on the right. Stay there." He walked away, leaving her standing in the center of his empty, echoing home. He needed a drink. He needed a cold shower. He needed to figure out how to save a woman who was already looking at him like he was the devil.
The room was bigger than her entire apartment. Ivy paced the floor. Her wet sneakers squeaked on the hardwood. There was a four-poster bed with silk sheets, a fireplace, and a balcony that overlooked the woods. It was beautiful. It was a prison. She went to the door. Locked. She went to the balcony. It was a 3-story drop. Ivy cursed. She went into the bathroom. It was filled with crystal bottles and plush towels. She didn't care about the luxury. She cared about survival. She grabbed a heavy perfume bottle. It was glass, thick and heavy. Without thinking, she smashed it against the marble sink. Crash. The glass shattered. The smell of expensive roses filled the air, mixing with the scent of her own fear. She picked up a long, jagged shard. It was sharp. Dangerous. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She went back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, the glass shard hidden behind her back. She waited. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes? Hours? Eventually, the lock clicked. Ivy stiffened. Her grip on the glass tightened until it cut into her fingers. The door opened. Kieran walked in. He had changed. The suit was gone. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to his chest. He looked less like a politician and more like a predator. He was carrying a tray. Food. He stopped when he saw her. His eyes flicked to the bathroom door, then back to her. He smelled the spilled perfume. He knew. "You're going to cut yourself," he said. His voice was tired. "Stay back," Ivy warned. She brought the glass shard out from behind her back. She held it out like a knife. It shook in her hand. Kieran didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the weapon. He walked over to the small table by the fireplace and set the tray down. "There's soup," he said. "And bread. Eat." "I'm not hungry," she lied. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "You think I brought you here to hurt you?" he asked. "You kidnapped me," Ivy snapped. "You claimed me against my will. In my world, that's not a date. That's a crime." He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "In your world, you were 5 minutes away from being executed," he said. "I bought you time. That's all." He took a step toward her. "Don't," she shouted, thrusting the glass forward. He stopped. He looked at the jagged glass, then up at her eyes. "Do you know who lived in this room before you?" he asked quietly. Ivy blinked. The question threw her off. "What?" "My sister," he said. "She was an Omega too. The council killed her because she refused to bond with the Alpha they chose." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Sad. Ivy lowered the glass just an inch. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," he said, taking another step. "I couldn't save her. But I'm going to save you." He reached out. Ivy flinched, expecting him to grab the weapon. Instead, he gently took the glass shard from her hand. His fingers were warm. Gentle. He tossed the glass into the trash can like it was nothing. Then, he did something that shocked her. He knelt. The big, terrifying Alpha went down on one knee in front of her. He wasn't submitting. He was inspecting her hand. "You're bleeding again," he murmured. He pulled a bandage from his pocket. He wrapped her hand, his touch surprisingly light. Ivy stared at the top of his head. She could smell him, pine and rain. He was so close. He could snap her neck. But he didn't. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk it for a stranger?" He finished the bandage and looked up. His ice blue eyes were soft now. "Haunted. Because you don't smell like a stranger, Ivy," he said. He stood up, towering over her again. The mask was back in place. "Eat the soup," he ordered. "We have a long day tomorrow." He turned and walked to the door. "What happens tomorrow?" she called out. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. He didn't look back. "Tomorrow," he said, "I teach you how to lie to the people who want you dead." The door clicked shut. Ivy was alone again. She looked at the bandage on her hand. It was perfect. Professional. She touched it, her heart pounding a strange, confused rhythm. She was still a prisoner. She knew that. But for the first time in 25 years, she didn't feel like prey. Fire. It wasn't the kind that burned wood. It was the kind that boiled blood. Ivy curled into a tight ball on the floor of the walk-in closet. The silk dresses hanging above her brushed against her cheek like ghost fingers. She was shivering, yet her skin felt like it was touching a hot stove. The suppressants were gone. 25 years of chemicals were leaving her system. And they were taking her sanity with them. She clawed at the carpet. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. It hurt. Everything hurt. Her senses were dialing up to 11. The smell of the cedar wood in the closet was overwhelming. The sound of her own heartbeat was deafening. But worse than the pain was the instinct. Her wolf was waking up. And it was terrified. "Hide," it whispered. "Burrow. Dark. Safe." She squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't let him see her like this. Not him. Not the alpha. If he smelled the heat on her, if he smelled the biological invitation, he wouldn't be able to stop. That's what they said about alphas. They were slaves to biology. Beasts in suits. The bedroom door opened. Ivy stopped breathing. Ivy? His voice was low. Rough. It vibrated through the floorboards and settled in her chest. She didn't answer. She pressed herself harder into the corner, behind a row of winter coats. Maybe if she was quiet enough, he would leave. Step. 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 He was coming closer. I can hear your heart, he said. It sounds like a hummingbird. The closet door creaked open. Light flooded in, blinding her. Ivy whimpered. She tried to scramble back, but there was nowhere to go. Kieran stood in the doorway. He looked massive. The hallway light created a halo around him, casting his face in shadow. He smelled like a storm. Rain and power. It hit her senses like a physical blow. Go away, she croaked. Her voice was weak. Please. He didn't leave. Instead, he stepped inside. The space instantly became too small. He knelt down. He was holding something. A bowl? A cloth? You're burning up, he murmured. He reached out. Ivy flinched. Don't touch me. She expected anger. She expected him to drag her out. But then, he stopped. His hand hovered in the air, inches from her burning skin. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. His voice was incredibly soft. The withdrawal is brutal. I know. He dipped a cloth into the bowl of ice water. He wrung it out. Lean forward, he instructed. Maybe it was the authority in his voice, or maybe it was the promise of cool water, but she obeyed. She leaned her forehead against his hand. He placed the cold cloth on the back of her neck. The relief was instant. Ivy let out a long, shaky breath. Oh God. Breathe, he whispered. Just breathe. He stayed there. Kneeling on the floor in his expensive pants. Wiping the sweat from her brow. He didn't try to claim her. He didn't try to touch her anywhere else. He was fighting it. She could see it. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. His pupils were blown wide, black holes swallowing the blue. He wanted her. Her scent must be driving him crazy. Even so, he didn't move. Why, she asked, her eyes fluttering closed. Why are you helping me? He paused. The cloth rested cool against her cheek. Because, he said, his voice straining, you are under my protection. And I don't let my people suffer. My people. The words floated in the dark. Ivy leaned into his touch. She was too sick to fight. Too tired to hate him. For tonight, just for tonight, she let the monster take care of her.
Kieran stared at the report on his desk, but the words were swimming. He couldn't focus. Not when the scent of honeysuckle was drifting down the hallway. It had been 2 days since the withdrawal fever broke. 2 days of him pacing outside her door like a guard dog. He rubbed his temples. He was exhausted. The library was usually his sanctuary. It was quiet. It smelled like old paper and dust. But today, the silence felt loud. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. They were light. Hesitant. Bare feet on hardwood. Kieran didn't look up. If he looked at her, he would stare. And if he stared, he would remember how she looked in that closet, vulnerable, trusting, beautiful. I didn't know you could read, a voice said. Kieran stopped writing. He looked up. Ivy was standing in the doorway. She was wearing one of his old shirts. It swallowed her frame, hanging down to her knees. She looked better. The color was back in her cheeks. I'm an alpha, he said dryly. Not a barbarian. She walked into the room. She moved with a natural grace, despite the fear she still carried in her shoulders. She ran a finger along the spine of a leather-bound book. "Most alphas I've met think books are just kindling," she said. There was a bite to her tone. A challenge. "Most alphas are idiots," Kieran replied. She paused. She pulled a book off the shelf. She looked at the cover. Her eyebrows shot up. "The Fall of the Roman Empire?" she asked. "Human history?" "Humans make the same mistakes we do," Kieran said, leaning back in his chair. "They just do it without claws. It's educational." Ivy looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, she wasn't looking at his muscles or his teeth. She was looking at his mind. "My father used to read this," she said softly. The air in the room shifted. It was the first time she had mentioned the traitor. Kieran stayed very still. General Thorne was a brilliant tactician. Before the end, Ivy's grip on the book tightened. "He wasn't a traitor," she whispered. "He was framed." Kieran watched her. He saw the fire in her eyes. The loyalty. It was fierce. It was dangerous. "I know," he said. Ivy froze. The book slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "What?" she breathed. Kieran stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped a few feet away from her, giving her space. "The council said he sold secrets," Kieran said quietly. "But the evidence never added up. I went through the files myself." You investigated?" "I like puzzles," he said simply. "And your father's death was a messy one." He picked up the book. He dusted it off and handed it back to her. Their fingers brushed. A spark, hot and electric, jumped between them. Ivy didn't pull away. She stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "You're not what I expected," she murmured. "Disappointed?" he asked, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "Confused," she admitted. "Monsters aren't supposed to like history." "Maybe," Kieran said, his voice dropping an octave, "you need to stop listening to stories and start reading the source material." The moment stretched. It was fragile. A tiny thread of connection spinning between them. But then, the intercom buzzed. "Alpha," Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker. "We have a problem at the gate." The moment shattered. Kieran sighed. He turned away, the mask of the cold leader sliding back into place. "Stay here," he ordered. But as he walked to the door, he felt her eyes on his back. Not with fear. With curiosity.
The peace didn't last. It never did. Ivy followed Kieran to the foyer. She knew she should stay hidden, but curiosity was a dangerous thing. She stayed in the shadows of the staircase, peering through the banister. The front door was open. A man stood there. He was older than Kieran, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He wore the crest of the High Council on his lapel. Lord Vane. Ivy's blood ran cold. She recognized him from the news. He was the one who signed the execution orders. "Kieran," Vane said. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. "We haven't seen you at the sessions." "I've been busy," Kieran said. He stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. He didn't invite the man in. "So I hear," Vane said. He sniffed the air. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "I smell her. The stray you picked up." Ivy shrank back. "Stray. She has a name," Kieran said. His voice was calm, but Ivy heard the edge in it. "The warning." "Does she?" Vane laughed. "It smells like Omega. Lowborn. Probably crawling with fleas." Ivy flinched. Shame burned her cheeks. That was all she was to them. A dirty secret. "She's a waitress, isn't she?" Vane continued, stepping closer. "Tell me, Kieran. Is the sex worth the embarrassment? Or is she just a warm body until you find a proper mate? The air in the foyer changed instantly. The temperature dropped. Kieran didn't move. He didn't shout. But a low, vibrating sound filled the room. A growl. It wasn't human. It was deep, primal, and terrifying. "Careful, Vane," Kieran said. His voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was jagged. "You are speaking about my pack," Kieran said. "And in this house, we don't insult family." Vane blinked. He took a step back. He looked surprised. "You claimed her?" "Officially?" "I claimed her," Kieran lied smoothly. "And if you speak about her with anything less than respect, I will rip your tongue out." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Ivy held her breath. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would bruise her ribs. He defended her. He didn't have to. He could have laughed. He could have agreed. But he stood there, a wall of muscle and rage, challenging a council lord for her. For the waitress. Vane cleared his throat. He looked nervous. I didn't know. My apologies, Alpha." "Leave," Kieran commanded. Vane turned and walked away. Fast. Kieran stood there, watching him go. His shoulders were tight. His fists were clenched at his sides. Ivy stepped out of the shadows. "You lied," she whispered. Kieran turned. His eyes were still blazing with residual anger. But when he looked at her, the fire softened. "I didn't lie about the tongue part," he said. He walked past her, heading toward the stairs. But as he passed, he paused. "You're not a stray, Ivy," he said, his voice low. "And you're not a warm body." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He walked up the stairs, leaving her standing in the foyer. Ivy touched her chest. The shame was gone. In its place, was something terrifying. Hope. The sanctuary was a lie. Ivy sat on the stone bench in the garden, the winter sun feeling cold against her skin. The estate walls were high, topped with cameras and sensors, designed to keep the world out. But walls couldn't stop secrets. A maid had slipped a folded piece of paper onto Ivy's breakfast tray earlier. No words. Just a nervous glance and a hasty retreat. Ivy unfolded the note for the 10th time. The paper was cheap, greasy. It smelled like the city. It smelled like her old life. "Nice cage, ghost. I know who you really are. I know about the general. 50,000 credits by midnight, or I tell your alpha boyfriend that he's sleeping with a traitor. S. Silas. The suppressant dealer." Ivy's hands trembled. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet garden. Her breath caught. He knew. He didn't just know she was an Omega, he knew about her father. If Silas talked, Kieran wouldn't just kick her out. He would be duty-bound to execute her. Or worse, the council would destroy him for harboring her. She looked up at the house. Kieran was in his office. He had defended her against Vane. He had iced her fever. He was starting to look less like a captor and more like something else. Something she couldn't afford to lose. But she couldn't tell him. If she told him, she implicated him. If she told him, the fragile truce they had built would shatter. She had to fix this herself. She needed money. Fast. Ivy stood up. Her legs felt heavy, like she was wading through water. She looked back at the house, at the window of Kieran's study. She knew where the safe was. She had seen him open it yesterday to put away files. It was stealing. It was betrayal. It was suicide if he caught her. Even so, she didn't have a choice. She crumpled the note in her fist. The sharp edges dug into her palm, reopening the cut under the bandage. The sting grounded her. She walked back toward the house. Her steps were silent on the grass. She feared the man threatening to expose her past, but she was equally terrified of betraying the man who protected her future. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and pine from the house. It smelled like Kieran. Ivy squeezed her eyes shut. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the wind. Acting on impulse, she slipped through the terrace doors. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She moved like a ghost. She moved like the thief the world already thought she was.
Kieran smelled the guilt before he saw the crime. He had been standing on the balcony of his office, watching the storm clouds roll in over the tree line. The air pressure was dropping, making his headache worse. But then, the scent changed. It wasn't just the rain. It was acrid. Sour. The specific chemical spike of adrenaline and shame. Ivy. He turned. The office was dark, lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace. But his night vision was sharp. He saw her. She was kneeling by the wall safe behind his desk. Her hands were shaking as she twisted the dial. She was fast. Practiced. She had the combination. He must have been careless yesterday. A silence so loud it rang in his ears filled the room. Kieran didn't move. He didn't breathe. He watched as the heavy steel door clicked open. She reached inside. She didn't touch the files. She didn't touch the jewels. She grabbed a stack of credit chips. Cash. Untraceable. She was running. The thought hit him like a physical blow. After everything, after the fever, the library, the defense against Vane, she was just going to steal from him and run. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in his chest. "Take it all," he said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder in the quiet room. "If you're going to betray me, Ivy, don't do it halfway." Ivy froze. She didn't spin around. She went perfectly still. The stack of chips slipped from her fingers and scattered across the floor with a plastic clatter. Slowly, she turned. Her face was pale. Even in the dim light, he could see the terror in her eyes. She looked like she expected him to strike her. "Kieran," she whispered. "Don't lie," he snarled. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He loomed over her. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to demand to know why she wasn't enough for him to keep. Instead, he slammed his hand against the wall next to her head, trapping her. "Why?" he demanded. "I gave you safety. I gave you a home. Is the urge to run that strong?" She pressed her back against the desk. She was trembling. But she didn't look away. "I'm not running," she said. Her voice was shaking, but her chin was up. "Then what is this?" He gestured to the scattered money. "A tip?" "I needed it," she choked out. "For what?" She bit her lip. She looked down. She was hiding something. Kieran leaned in. He invaded her space. He inhaled her scent, looking for the truth. Beneath the guilt, beneath the fear, there was something else. Desperation. She wasn't stealing for greed. She was stealing for survival. Suddenly, the rage drained out of him, leaving only a cold, heavy dread. "Who is it?" he asked softly. She looked up, startled. "What?" "You're not a thief, Ivy," he said. He reached out, his fingers grazing her jaw. Her skin was cold. "You're terrified. Someone is forcing you to do this." The moment their eyes locked, he saw the dam break. Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but one escaped, tracking through the dirt on her cheek. "Please," she whispered. "Let me go. I can fix it." "No," Kieran said. The word was absolute. He stepped back. He wasn't her jailer anymore. He was her alpha. "Tell me," he commanded. "Now."
Ivy felt her defenses crumbling. He was too close. Too smart. Too everything. She looked at the money on the floor. It looked pathetic now. 50,000 credits wouldn't buy her freedom. Silas would just come back for more. He would bleed her dry until he decided to sell the information anyway. She looked at Kieran. He wasn't angry anymore. He was focused. Intense. He was waiting for her to trust him. Maybe she was just tired of fighting alone. "It's my dealer," she whispered. Kieran's eyes narrowed. "The one who gave you the suppressants?" Ivy nodded. "He sent a note. He knows I'm here. He wants 50,000, or he tells the council." She left out the part about her father. She couldn't say it. The words stuck in her throat like glass. So, she gave him a half-truth. "He says he'll tell them I'm using illegal drugs," she lied. "He'll ruin your reputation. He'll say you're harboring a criminal." Kieran went still. As if the world narrowed, he tilted his head. He was analyzing. Calculating. "He threatened you?" Kieran asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Yes." "And he threatened me?" "Yes." Kieran laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound. It sent a shiver down Ivy's spine, not of fear, but of something electric. "You were going to pay him," Kieran said, shaking his head. "You were going to protect me by paying a blackmailer." "I have to fix my own mistakes," Ivy argued. "You are not a mistake," Kieran said firmly. He turned away from her. He walked to the window, looking out at the storm. "Where is the drop?" he asked. "Midnight," Ivy said. "Behind the old warehouse in Sector 4. Kieran nodded. He checked his watch. "Good." He walked to the coat rack and grabbed his trench coat. He pulled it on, the black wool making his shoulders look even broader. "What are you doing?" Ivy asked. Panic rising in her chest. "I'm handling it," he said. He opened the door. She grabbed his arm. "Kieran, no. You can't go. If he talks to you." If Silas talked, Kieran would know the truth. He would know she was a thorn. Kieran looked down at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own. His grip was warm. Solid. "Ivy," he said softly. "You don't pay criminals." He leaned in. His lips brushed her forehead. A chaste, burning kiss that felt like a promise. "You feed them to the wolves." With a single glance, he pulled away. He walked out into the dark hallway. Ivy stood frozen in the center of the office. The money was still scattered on the floor. Even more terrifying was the realization settling in her gut like lead. She hadn't saved him. She had just sent him directly to the man who held the key to her destruction. When Kieran came back, if he came back, he would know everything. And then, the fairy tale would be over. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful, it was a countdown. Ivy paced the marble floor of the foyer, her sneakers squeaking against the polished stone. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a hammer striking a nail into her coffin. He was gone. Kieran had walked out into the storm to face a shark, armed with nothing but arrogance and a checkbook. But he didn't know the shark had teeth. Ivy stopped pacing. She gripped her hair, tugging until it hurt. Silas wouldn't just take the money. Silas was a bottomless pit. Once he realized Kieran, the alpha of the city, was involved, he would want more. He would trade the biggest secret he had. He would trade her name. She couldn't stay here. She looked at the valet tray by the door. A spare set of keys to the SUV sat there, gleaming under the chandelier light. She snatched them. Her hands were shaking so bad she almost dropped them. She wasn't a driver. She wasn't a hero. She was a waitress who hid in closets. Still, she moved toward the heavy oak door. She had to get there before Silas talked. She had to stop the transaction. Even if it meant giving herself up to the council to save Kieran from being implicated. She shoved the heavy door open. The wind hit her instantly. A wall of rain and ice. It soaked her shirt in seconds, plastering the fabric to her skin. No matter how hard she tried to ignore the fear, it clawed at her throat. She was driving into a war zone. She scrambled into the driver's seat of the SUV. The engine roared to life, a beast waking up. She slammed her foot on the gas. The tires spun on the wet gravel, spraying mud. The car fishtailed, then straightened out, rocketing down the long driveway. Ivy gripped the wheel. Her knuckles were white. "Don't let him know," she whispered to the empty car. "Please, just let me die without him hating me." The wipers slashed back and forth, fighting the deluge. Sector 4 was 20 minutes away. But then, a thought chilled her more than the rain. What if she was already too late? By the time she reached the warehouse district, the neon signs were flickering, buzzing like angry hornets. The streets were empty. Abandoned. It smelled like oil and ozone. She killed the headlights. She let the car drift into an alleyway, hidden by the shadows of a rusted dumpster. She saw Kieran's car. It was parked 2 blocks down. Empty. Ivy killed the engine. She opened the door and stepped out into the deluge. The rain washed away her scent, but it couldn't wash away the dread. Suddenly, she heard it. A voice. Shouting. Then, a sound she knew too well. The wet, meaty thud of a fist hitting flesh. Ivy started to run. She splashed through puddles, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She turned the corner of the warehouse. And she stopped. Then, her world tilted.
Kieran didn't feel the cold. He only felt the red-hot burn of fury. He held Silas by the throat, pinning the smaller man against the brick wall of the warehouse. Silas's feet dangled 3 inches off the ground. He was clawing at Kieran's wrist, his eyes bulging. "Talk," Kieran snarled. A desperate, wheezing gasp answered him. Kieran loosened his grip. Just enough for air. Not enough for escape. Silas coughed, spitting blood onto Kieran's trench coat. He grinned. It was a bloody, broken thing. You don't know." Silas wheezed. "You don't know what you have." "I know you're a leech," Kieran said. His voice was flat. "Deadly. And I know I'm about to squash you." She's not just a stray," Silas choked out. "She's royalty." Kieran paused. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was the way the man's heart skipped a beat, but Kieran didn't snap his neck right then. "Explain," Kieran commanded. "Thorn," Silas whispered. The name hung in the rain-soaked air like a curse. General Thorn. The traitor. Kieran went still. As the realization set in, pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. The royal scent. The high-tier genetics. The way she knew military history. The fear in her eyes when he mentioned the council. She wasn't just hiding from a draft. She was hiding from a genocide. Ivy was the lost daughter. The last survivor of the House of Thorn. Not only that, but by claiming her, Kieran had accidentally declared war on the entire council. "Yeah," Silas laughed, seeing the realization on Kieran's face. "Big trouble, Alpha. Big trouble. I want double. No, triple. Or I go to Vane right now." Silas reached into his pocket. He pulled out a phone. "I have Vane on speed dial," Silas taunted. "Imagine his face when I tell him you're sleeping with the enemy." Kieran looked at the phone. Then he looked at Silas. He saw the greed. He saw the malice. Because this man breathed, Ivy was in danger. Because this man knew the truth, Ivy would never be safe. Kieran didn't feel anger anymore. He felt clarity. Cold, absolute clarity. There was no negotiation. There was no payoff. "You're right," Kieran said softly. "It is big trouble." Kieran moved. He didn't grab the phone. He grabbed Silas's head. He twisted. Crack. The sound was sharp. Final. Silas went limp. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the wet pavement, cracking the screen. Kieran let go. The body slid down the wall, leaving a smear of red on the bricks. He stood there, staring at the dead man. Rain mixed with the blood on his hands, turning it into pink rivulets that ran down his fingers. He had just committed murder. Unsanctioned. Illegal. If the council found out, he was done. Yet, he didn't feel regret. He felt the bond in his chest pulse. Warm. Steady. He had protected her. Suddenly, a sound cut through the rain. A gasp. Kieran turned. Standing at the mouth of the alley, soaked to the bone and shaking like a leaf, was Ivy. Her eyes were locked on the body. Then, they locked on him.
The rain tasted like iron. Ivy stood frozen, her eyes tracing the line of blood on the brick wall. He was dead. Silas was dead. And Kieran. Kieran was the one who had done it. He stood over the body, his chest heaving. His hands were coated in red. He looked like the monster everyone said he was. He looked terrifying. Even so, she couldn't look away. He turned slowly. His ice blue eyes met hers across the darkness. There was no apology in them. No regret. Just an intensity that burned through the storm. "Ivy," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. She took a step back. Her heel splashed in a puddle. "You killed him," she whispered. The words were snatched away by the wind. "I had to," Kieran said. He stepped over the body, walking toward her. The instinct to run flared. But her legs wouldn't obey. "He told you," she choked out. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. "Didn't he?" "He told you who I am." Kieran stopped 3 feet away. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask, "Who are you?" He just nodded. "He told me," Kieran confirmed. Ivy closed her eyes. This was it. The execution. He was a council alpha. His duty was to the law. He had killed Silas to silence a blackmailer, but now he had to kill her to cleanse his honor. "Do it," she whispered. She tilted her head back, exposing her throat. "Just make it quick." The tension broke, not with violence, but with touch. Warm, wet hands cupped her face. Ivy's eyes flew open. Kieran wasn't reaching for her throat. He was holding her face like it was something precious. His thumbs brushed away the rain under her eyes. "You think I care about the law?" he asked roughly. "You think I care about a dead general?" "I'm a traitor," she sobbed. "My blood is poison." "Your blood," Kieran growled, leaning his forehead against hers, "is the only thing that keeps my heart beating." Her world tilted. He wasn't killing her. He was claiming her. Again. For real this time. "I knew," he confessed. His breath was hot against her skin. "I knew the moment I smelled you in the diner. I didn't claim you to own you, Ivy. I claimed you to save you." Ivy stared at him. The truth washed over her, more powerful than the storm. He had known. All this time. He had known, and he had chosen her anyway. "Kieran." She breathed. Before the words left her lips, the air was shattered by a new sound. Sirens. Wailing. Screaming. Getting closer. Blue and red lights flashed against the wet brick walls, illuminating the dead body behind them. Kieran stiffened. He pulled away, looking toward the street. "The police," he cursed. Someone heard the shot. It was a nightmare realizing their moment of peace was strangled before it could take its first breath. Kieran grabbed her hand. His grip was bruising. "Listen to me," he said, his eyes wild. "We can't run. If we run, we look guilty. We are guilty." Ivy cried, pointing at the corpse. "No," Kieran said. He pulled her flush against his chest. "I am guilty. You are a victim." "What?" "Trust me," he pleaded. The tire screeched on the pavement. Car door slammed. Freeze! Council guard. Flashlights cut through the darkness, blinding them. Ivy realized the trap had snapped shut. They weren't free. They were cornered. And looking at the body of the blackmailer, and the blood on Kieran's hands, she knew there was no talking their way out of this. The descent had begun. The world ended not with a bang, but with the snap of cold metal. Get off me! Ivy screamed, thrashing against the grip of the council guards. Before she could reach Kieran, a heavy hand slammed her against the wet hood of the patrol car. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Rain slicked her hair to her face, blinding her, but she didn't care about the cold. She only cared about him. She saw Kieran fighting. He wasn't human anymore. He was a blur of violence and rage. He had taken down 3 guards already, tossing them like rag dolls into the alley walls. His roar shook the puddles on the ground. Still, there were too many of them. Kieran, she shrieked. Stop. They'll kill you. His head snapped toward her voice. That was his mistake. That split-second distraction allowed a guard to raise a rifle. Not a bullet. A dart. Thwip. The tranquilizer hit Kieran in the neck. He staggered. The growl in his throat turned into a confused gargle. He reached for the dart, his movements sluggish, heavy. It became a nightmare. 4 guards piled onto him. They drove him into the mud. They chained his hands, his feet, his neck. They treated him like a beast. No, Ivy sobbed. No, please. Suddenly, a guard grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Quiet, traitor, he spat. Something inside her broke, replaced by a cold, hollow terror. They knew. They already knew. They shoved her into the back of a separate van. It smelled like bleach and old blood. A cage within a cage. As the doors slammed shut, cutting off her view of Kieran, the darkness swallowed her whole. She was alone. Terrifyingly, she knew exactly where they were taking her. The cells of silence. The place where Omegas went to disappear. Despite her efforts to stop them, the tears came. Hot and stinging. She banged her fists against the metal partition. He didn't do it. It was self-defense. He was protecting me. No one answered. Instead, the engine roared to life. The van lurched forward. She slid across the metal bench, curling into a ball. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold on to the image of his eyes in the rain. Maybe it was destiny that brought them together. But then, looking at the darkness around her, she realized fate had a cruel sense of humor. It had given her a prince, only to turn him into a prisoner.
Pain was a color. It was a sickly, throbbing green that coated the inside of his eyelids. Kieran tried to open his eyes. His lashes felt glued together. His head felt like it was stuffed with cotton and broken glass. Even so, he forced himself awake. He was seated. Metal bit into his wrists and ankles. A chair. Bolt down. He tested the chains. High tensile steel. Reinforced. Worse, he couldn't feel his wolf. The connection to his inner beast was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow void in his chest. Wolfsbane. They had dosed him. Heavy. Awake, are we? The voice was smooth. Smug. Kieran lifted his head. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lord Vane stood in front of him. He was wearing a pristine gray suit, untouched by the storm outside. He held a file in his hand. It was clear this wasn't an arrest. It was a coup. Where is she? Kieran croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. Vane smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The girl? She's safe. For now. She's in the Omega Wing. If you touch her... Kieran started, but the words slurred. Save your threats, Alpha, Vane interrupted. You have bigger problems. Like explaining why you murdered a citizen in an alleyway. He was a blackmailer, Kieran rasped. He threatened the council. Did he? Vane opened the file. Or did he threaten you? Did he threaten to reveal that you've been harboring the daughter of General Thorne? Kieran went still. In fact, Vane looked delighted. He had all the cards. You knew, Vane said, stepping closer. You knew who she was, and you didn't turn her in. That is treason, Kieran. Punishable by death. Because the drugs were clouding his mind, Kieran struggled to find a tactical angle. He needed to protect Ivy. He needed to take the fall. She didn't know, Kieran lied. I forced her. I kidnapped her. She's innocent. Vane laughed. A dry, rattling sound. Oh, Kieran. You really are sentimental. Vane tossed a photo onto Kieran's lap. It was grainy. CCTV footage. It showed Ivy opening Kieran's safe. It showed her taking the money. She was robbing you, Vane said softly. She was running. She didn't care about you. She was using you to get resources. Kieran looked at the photo. Despite that, he remembered her tears. He remembered her driving into the storm to save him. You're lying, Kieran growled. Am I? Vane leaned in. She signed a confession, Kieran. She traded her testimony for immunity. She says you brainwashed her. His world shattered. Could she? Would she? In the stillness that followed, doubt crept in. A cold, insidious snake. She was a survivor. She had lied for 25 years. Was he just another mark? But then, he remembered the rain. He remembered the way she looked at him over the body of Silas. Get out, Kieran whispered. Think about it, Vane said, turning to the door. You rot in here, while she walks free. All because you fell for a pretty scent. The door clanged shut. Meanwhile, the silence returned. Kieran stared at the wall. The wolfsbane burned in his veins. He didn't know what was true anymore. She feared dying, but she was more terrified of living with the fact that he might have loved a lie.
The cell had no windows. Just 4 walls of gray concrete and a heavy steel door with a small slot for food. Ivy sat on the thin cot. She wasn't crying anymore. She was past tears. She was in the numb, cold place that comes after the heart breaks. Hours later, the slot opened. A tray slid through. Water. Stale bread. And a folded piece of paper. Ivy stared at it. She reached for it. Her fingers trembled. It was a copy of a document. An affidavit. I, Alpha Kieran, hereby declare that the Omega known as Ivy was held against her will. Her actions were the result of Alpha command. She is blameless. I accept full responsibility for the death of Silas and the concealment of the Thorne bloodline. He had signed it. He had confessed. More than that, he had lied to save her. Again. Even after she stole from him. Even after she led him into the trap. Ivy pressed the paper to her chest. A sob ripped through her, raw and ugly. He was taking the fall. He was going to let them execute him for treason to buy her life. Suddenly, the shame that had been eating her alive turned into something else. Rage. Pure, molten rage. She stood up. She paced the small cell. She couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't be the ghost. Her father was a general. Her mate was an alpha. And she? She was a wolf. So, she refused to let him die. She looked at the walls. Solid. Unbreakable. Yet, every fortress had a weakness. She remembered the book in the library. The Fall of the Roman Empire. Kieran had said he liked puzzles. He liked strategy. If Vane had captured them this quickly, it meant Vane knew about Silas. Which meant Silas was working for Vane. It was a setup. From the beginning. Suddenly, the door handle turned. Ivy backed against the wall. A guard entered. He held a baton. He looked bored. Hearing time, he grunted. Vane wants to see you before the trial. As if summoned, a plan formed in Ivy's mind. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was insane. But it was all she had. She didn't lower her head. She didn't slump her shoulders. Instead, she lifted her chin. She let her eyes flash with the gold of her heritage. Take me to him, she commanded. The guard blinked. He looked surprised by the steel in her voice. With every step he took toward her, Ivy felt the fear recede. She wasn't walking to her execution. She was walking to war. And she let it happen, the transformation from prey to predator. Because if Kieran was willing to burn the world for her, she was going to make sure the council burned with it.
The chains were heavy, but the lie weighed more. Kieran sat in the dark. The wolfsbane was fading. It left a metallic taste in his mouth and a dull throb in his bones. Vane thought he was broken. Vane thought the photo of Ivy stealing the money was the final nail in the coffin. But then, Kieran remembered something. The safe. In the photo Vane showed him, the safe dial was set to 0. But Kieran never reset the dial. He always left it on the last number. 8. It was a small detail. Tiny. That detail changed everything. The photo was staged. It was a fake. Instantly, the doubt that had been poisoning Kieran's blood vanished. Ivy hadn't betrayed him. She hadn't signed a confession. She was holding the line. And if she was fighting for him, he would burn the world down for her. He tested the cuffs. High-grade steel. He couldn't break them. Not without his full wolf strength, and the drugs were still dampening that. He needed a weapon. Suddenly, the door opened. 2 guards walked in. They looked nervous. They held stun batons, sparking with blue electricity. Time to go, Alpha, one sneered. The executioner hates to wait. Kieran didn't look up. He let his head hang low. He let his shoulders slump. He played the part of the defeated beast. I can't walk, Kieran rasped. The drugs. The guards exchanged a look. They stepped closer. They got careless. Violence erupted in its purest form. Kieran moved. He didn't use his hands. He used his legs. He kicked out, sweeping the first guard's feet out from under him. The man hit the concrete with a sickening crack. The second guard swung the baton. Kieran didn't dodge. He took the hit. The electricity arced through his shoulder, burning his skin. Even so, he didn't stop. He lunged forward, slamming his forehead into the guard's nose. Blood sprayed. The guard dropped. Kieran stood up. He was panting. His body was screaming in pain. He looked at the unconscious men. He saw the keycard on the first guard's belt. He knelt and grabbed it with his bound hands. It was awkward. It was painful. He managed to unlock his ankle cuffs. He left the wrist cuffs on. It would look better for the show. He needed Vane to think he was still a prisoner. He needed them to drag him into that courtroom so he could see her. Because if he tried to escape now, they would hunt him down. But if he walked into that trial, he could turn it into a stage. He heard footsteps in the hall. More guards. Kieran sat back down on the chair. He put his head down. He hid the keycard in his boot. The door burst open as the new guards rushed in, seeing their fallen comrades. Get him up, the captain roared. Drag him if you have to. Rough hands grabbed him. They hauled him up. Kieran stumbled on purpose. He let them drag him. Deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. It wasn't the wolfsbane. It was hope. She was waiting for him. And God help anyone who stood in his way.
The high hall was a pit of vipers. Ivy stood in the center of the room. It was a massive, circular chamber with stone benches rising high into the shadows. Hundreds of council members sat there, looking down at her. They wore robes of red and black. They looked like executioners. She was terrified by the sea of hostile faces, but even more by the empty spot beside her. Where was he? Vane sat on the high podium. He looked like a king. He banged a gavel that sounded like a gunshot. "Bring in the traitor," Vane commanded. The heavy doors at the back of the room creaked open. Instantly, the air changed. Guards dragged a man in. He was bruised. He was bleeding. Chains bound his wrists. Kieran. Ivy's heart slammed against her ribs. He looked terrible. His shirt was torn. His face was pale. Yet, when he saw her, he didn't look defeated. He lifted his head. His ice blue eyes locked onto hers. The world seemed to pause. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He winked. A tiny, barely there flutter of his eyelid. A spark of arrogance. A promise. Her confidence returned. He knew. He wasn't broken. He was playing the game. Suddenly, Ivy felt a surge of power. It started in her toes and rushed up her spine. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a victim. She was his. And he was hers. Vane stood up. "Alpha Kieran. You stand accused of treason and murder. How do you plead?" Kieran opened his mouth, but a guard struck him in the back of the knees. He fell to the floor with a heavy thud. The crowd laughed. Ivy's hands curled into fists. Her nails dug into her palms, finding the old cut. The pain grounded her. Stepping forward, she silenced the room. "He doesn't plead," Ivy rang out. Her voice was clear. Loud. Vane looked down at her, amused. "The pet speaks? You have no voice here, girl." "I am not a pet," Ivy said. She walked toward Kieran. The guards moved to stop her, but she bared her teeth. A low growl ripped from her throat. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a wolf protecting its mate. The guards hesitated. Ivy reached Kieran. She didn't help him up. She stood over him, facing Vane. "I am Ivy Thorne," she announced. "Daughter of General Thorne." Gasps rippled through the room. "And I demand the right of truth," she shouted. The room hushed, and Vane's face went pale. "That law is ancient," Vane spat. "It hasn't been used in a century." "It is still the law," Ivy countered. "Trial by blood. The accuser against the accused. Winner takes all." Maybe it was audacity, or maybe it was the sheer force of her demand, but the crowd started to murmur. They were wolves. They respected strength. They respected blood. "She has no right." Vane yelled. "She has every right." The voice came from the floor. Kieran stood up. Slowly. Painfully. He stood until he towered over the guards. He moved to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ivy. "I second the motion," Kieran said. His voice was a deep rumble that shook the floorboards. "The right of truth. Unless the High Counselor is afraid to fight a girl?" Chaos erupted. The council members were shouting. But they weren't shouting at Ivy. They were looking at Vane. Waiting. If he refused, he looked weak. If he looked weak, he lost his power. Ivy looked at Kieran. He was smiling. It was a bloody, dangerous smile. She knew they had won the first round.
The arena was cold. It was an open-air pit beneath the high hall. The stone floor was stained with the rust of old blood. The council members watched from the balconies above, baying for violence. Kieran stood at the north end. Ivy was beside him. They had unlocked his cuffs. Slowly, the circulation was returning to his hands. Needles of pain pricked his skin, but the wolfsbane was fading faster now. The adrenaline was burning it out. He looked at Ivy. She looked small in the vast arena. She was wearing her dirty waitress uniform. She had no armor. No weapons. Still, she looked like a queen. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She looked at him. Her eyes were gold. Not brown. Gold. Her wolf was right at the surface. "No," she admitted. "But I'm not running." He reached out. He took her hand. His fingers laced with hers. When he looked at her, the noise of the crowd faded away. "You don't have to fight him," Kieran said. "I'll take him. You just have to tell the truth." Loudly. "I can do that," she whispered. "Vane is fast," Kieran warned. "He fights dirty. Stay behind me until I have him pinned." "Kieran," she said. "Yeah? I didn't sign the confession." "I know," he said. He squeezed her hand. "I know." The gates at the south end opened with a grinding of metal gears. Vane walked out. He wasn't wearing his suit anymore. He was stripped to the waist. His body was scarred, corded with old muscle. He held a long, silver blade. A ceremonial dagger. "This is not a duel to the death," Vane announced to the crowd, his voice booming. "This is a discipline. I will carve the lies out of them." Kieran felt a growl build in his chest. It started low and rose until it was a roar. Finally, the beast inside him snapped the leash. His bones cracked. His muscles shifted. Fur, black as night, rippled under his skin. He didn't shift fully. Not yet. He held the partial form. The hybrid form. Claws elongated from his fingertips. His teeth sharpened into fangs. Meanwhile, the crowd went wild. "Let the rite begin." Vane screamed. Before he finished, Vane charged. He moved with supernatural speed, the knife flashing in the moonlight. Kieran pushed Ivy behind him. He shoved her toward the wall, out of the line of fire. "Speak, Ivy." Kieran roared. "Tell them everything." Then, he turned to face the monster. Vane lunged. Kieran caught his wrist. They collided in the center of the arena. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was war. And he let it happen, the violence he had held back for so long. He wasn't fighting for politics. He wasn't fighting for the law. He was fighting for her. And he wasn't going to stop until Vane was dust.
The sound of bone hitting meat echoed like thunder in the stone pit. Ivy pressed her back against the rough arena wall, her eyes wide. In the center of the ring, two monsters were tearing each other apart. Kieran was a blur of black shadow and violence. He moved with a speed that defied physics, his claws tearing through Vane's defense. But Vane was older. He was experienced. And he had a knife. Too fast to track, Vane slashed out. The silver blade caught Kieran across the chest. Blood sprayed, dark and hot, splattering onto the sand. Ivy screamed his name. Kieran didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. He roared, a sound that shook the dust from the rafters, and slammed Vane into the ground. "Speak." Kieran bellowed at her, not looking away from his enemy. "Now." Her body moved on instinct. Ivy stepped away from the wall. She looked up at the balcony, at the hundreds of council members watching the blood sport. They were waiting for a winner. They were waiting for death. Instead, she gave them the truth. "Vane is the traitor," she screamed. Her voice cracked, but it carried. "He didn't just hunt my father. He hunted the truth." She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the crumpled note from Silas. It was bloodstained now. "He was paying Silas," she shouted, waving the paper like a flag. "He was running the suppressant trade. He kept the Omegas weak so he could sell them to the highest bidder." Stunned silence filled the arena. Then, murmurs broke out. Vane heard them. He snarled, kicking Kieran off him. He scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his nose. She lies. Vane shrieked. She is a mongrel bitch. I am a thorn. Ivy countered, stepping into the light. And my blood is pure. Unlike yours. Vane's eyes went wild. He looked at the crowd. He saw them turning. He saw his power slipping away like sand through his fingers. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. Vane realized he couldn't win the debate. So he decided to end the debate. He didn't attack Kieran. He spun around. He raised the silver knife. And he threw it. Straight at her heart. Everything froze. Ivy saw the blade spinning. She saw the glint of the metal. She couldn't dodge. She was frozen. But then, a shadow eclipsed the moon. Kieran didn't run. He leaped. He threw his body in front of hers. Thud. The sound was wet. Sickening. Kieran landed on his knees in front of her. He groaned, his head bowing. The knife was buried deep in his shoulder. No, Ivy whispered. The word ripped out of her throat. A heavy silence fell over the pit. Kieran reached up. With a grunt that sounded like tearing metal, he ripped the knife out of his own flesh. He dropped it. Clang. He stood up. Blood poured down his arm, but he didn't fall. He turned to Vane. Vane was trembling. He had no weapon left. Kieran walked toward him. He didn't run. He stalked. He was death incarnate. Vane fell to his knees. Mercy, he begged. Alpha, mercy. Kieran stopped. He raised his hand, claws extended, ready to take the head. The entire arena held its breath. Kieran looked at Ivy. His eyes were wild, golden, feral. He was asking her. Without another word, Ivy shook her head. Kieran turned back to Vane. He lowered his hand. I am not a butcher, Kieran growled, his voice echoing off the walls. And you are not worth the stain on my soul. He spat on the ground at Vane's feet. Arrest him, Kieran commanded the crowd. Immediately, the council guards poured into the arena. But they didn't come for Kieran. They came for Vane. Ivy ran. She crossed the sand. She didn't care about the blood. She crashed into Kieran, wrapping her arms around his waist. He sank against her, heavy and warm. We did it, he wheezed against her hair. And she let it happen, the tears finally falling, washing away the dirt and the fear.
The adrenaline was leaving him, and it was taking his strength with it. Kieran sat on the edge of the ambulance gurney. The paramedics were stitching his shoulder. No anesthesia. He didn't need it. The pain kept him awake. In the quiet aftermath, the chaos of the high hall seemed miles away. Vane was in chains. The council was in an emergency session. The laws were already being rewritten. Even so, Kieran didn't care about the politics. He only cared about the woman standing a few feet away. Ivy was wiping her face with a wet towel. She was covered in dust. Her uniform was torn. She looked exhausted. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. You're staring, she said softly, not looking up. I'm admiring, he corrected. He hissed as the medic pulled the knot tight on his stitches. Done, Alpha, the medic said nervously. You heal fast. Kieran stood up. The world swayed for a second, then steadied. He walked over to Ivy. Their gazes met, and the noise of the emergency crews faded into the background. You jumped in front of a knife, she said. Her voice trembled. It was a small knife, he joked weakly. She didn't laugh. She reached out and touched the bandage on his chest. Her fingers were shaking. You could have died, she whispered. Why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep bleeding for me? Kieran covered her hand with his. Because, he said, leaning down so his forehead rested against hers. I spent 20 years serving a council that wanted me to be a monster. You were the first person who looked at me and just saw a man. Her breath caught. I'm not a man, he murmured, brushing his thumb over her cheekbone. I'm a wolf. And wolves protect their mates. She surged up on her tiptoes. Her lips crashed against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted like tears and survival. She gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, anchoring him to the earth. Kieran groaned, wrapping his good arm around her waist, lifting her off the ground. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent that had started this whole war. Honeysuckle. Rain. And now, freedom. Take me home, she whispered against his mouth. Which home? He asked. The estate? No, she said, pulling back to look at him. Her eyes were clear. Somewhere with no walls. Somewhere where I don't have to hide. Kieran smiled. It was the first real, unburdened smile he had felt in years. I know a place, he said. Above them, the clouds broke. The storm was over. The moon shone down, bright and full.
The snow was deep, pristine white powder that muffled the world. Ivy stood on the porch of the cabin. It was small. Rough-hewn logs. A fireplace that smelled of cedar smoke. It was miles from the city. Miles from the council. Even better, there wasn't a single camera in sight. She took a deep breath. The cold air filled her lungs. For the first time in her life, she didn't check her wrist for a patch. She didn't reach for a pill bottle. She just breathed. Her scent was wild now. Unchecked. It drifted into the wind, mixing with the pine trees. Suddenly, the door behind her opened. Warmth spilled out. Kieran stepped onto the porch. He was wearing flannel and jeans. He held 2 mugs of coffee. He looked different. The hard lines of the politician were gone. The tension in his shoulders had melted away. He handed her a mug. You're going to freeze, he said softly. I like the cold, Ivy replied. It feels real. He moved behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was a furnace. Solid. Hers. The council sent a message, he murmured into her hair. They want to offer you a seat. The Thorn seat. They want to restore your family's title. Ivy leaned her head back on his shoulder. She watched a hawk circle the treeline. Let them keep the title, she said. I don't want to be a lord. I just want to be this. This? Free, she whispered. Kieran turned her around in his arms. He set the mugs on the railing. His eyes searched hers. They were molten gold. You are free, he promised. No more hiding. No more ghosts. He kissed her. This time it was slow. Deep. It started as a brush of lips and deepened into a claim. He picked her up, her legs wrapping around his waist naturally, as if they had done this 1,000 times. He carried her back inside the warm cabin. He kicked the door shut, locking out the world. Between one breath and the next, he lowered her onto the rug by the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. I love you, she said. The words felt huge. Heavy. True. Kieran stopped. He looked down at her, his expression raw. I have loved you, he said, his voice thick with emotion, since the moment you dropped that plate. Her soul answered. He kissed her again, and the fire roared in the grate, echoing the heat between them. They were no longer the alpha and the waitress. They were no longer the prince and the traitor. They were just Kieran and Ivy. And she let it happen, the happily ever after she never thought she'd survive to see.